They're equally at home, living in the wettest of rainforests and the driest of deserts. Their diversity of habitat is matched by their extraordinary range in size and shape. The smallest are not much bigger than a fly. The largest are as big as a football. What's more remarkable is the fact that although they're all dependent on moisture, many have evolved extraordinary behavior or physical features that has enabled them to conquer every environment on Earth, apart from the oceans. Spring arrives at last in the mountains of southern Europe. Even this harsh environment is home to frogs. As winter releases its icy grip, the amphibians awaken from their 5-month-long hibernation. Some species can withstand prolonged periods of sub-zero temperatures, down to as low as -6 degrees, because of the presence of glycerol, an antifreeze, in their veins. It keeps their blood sluggishly flowing, sustaining vital tissue and organs. Frogs, like all amphibians, are cold-blooded, so their body temperature is normally the same as their surroundings. As the ice melts, movement returns. Breathing deepens as the need for oxygen increases. Stiff muscles flex once again. But even after 5 months frozen in the ice, the common frog's first thoughts are not of food, but of finding a mate. Male frogs normally emerge before females, and there's a lot of competition. The largest male normally kicks off his rivals. The meltwater is icy cold, barely above freezing, but it's imperative that the frogs spawn as soon as possible. The stream washes them down to mountain pools. Those that arrive without a mate should find one here amid the writhing mass of amphibians. These frogs flood the market with their offspring. Over the course of 3 or 4 days, hundreds of thousands of eggs are laid in the hope that at least some will survive to adulthood. If predators do find their way here, they'll be unlikely to eat all of the tadpoles. At lower elevations, a related species, the moor frog, is equally prolific. But here, several species breed in the same pool, so males need to find a way of standing out for the arriving females. So, for a few days each spring, the male casts off its well-camouflaged brown livery and turns an incredible powdery blue colour to make himself easily recognizable. Other species of frog are permanently brightly coloured. Some dazzle predators. Others warn them that attempting to eat this colourful morsel would be a big mistake. The poison dart frogs of Central and South America secrete some of the deadliest natural toxins known. a fact that didn't escape the local Indians, who used their secretion to tip their blow darts. One frog contains enough toxin to kill several thousand people. Poison dart frogs exist in an almost infinite variety of colours, but the deadliest is the yellow Phyllobates terribilis, which is so toxic that its mucus alone produces a tingling sensation in the skin when touched. Although these toxins are lethal if they get into the bloodstream, they evolved to taste so foul as to make the frog inedible. Poison dart frogs are tiny. Few exceed 3 centimetres and most are less than 2. This spider would normally eat such a tiny frog that ended up in its web, but it wisely cuts the poison dart frog free. Despite their small size, these frogs and their more soberly coloured relatives are among the most aggressive. The males constantly sing out their ownership of a small patch of forest floor. Freestanding water is in short supply even in a tropical rainforest, so the male frog jealously guards a water-filled leaf axil where he'll watch over his tadpoles. When a rival male encroaches on the resident's patch, a wrestling match ensues that can, if the frogs are evenly matched in size, go on for over an hour. The two tiny contestants try to wrestle their opponent to the ground. Eventually the winner, normally the resident male, drives off his rival and advertises his ownership of a prime location once more. The strawberry poison dart frog is aptly named. This particular population live in the Bocas del Toro Islands off Panama. The male interrupts its trilling call only to attack any rivals that wander into his metre-square territory to compete for the resident females. His ownership confirmed, he now sets about attracting a mate. He leads her to a safe, secluded spot where she'll lay 1 or 2 eggs, and he will then fertilize them. In this case it's a single egg, and the female stays close by for several days until it develops into a tadpole. The only available water on the island is in the axils of these plants. Somehow the tadpole has to reach them. It does so by hitching a ride on its mother's back, using its modified mouth as a sucker to cling on. It may be carried in this way for several days, living off its yolk supply. Eventually, the female climbs down into one of her favourite plants and deposits her offspring into the tiny reservoir of rainwater where there are no resident predators. But the story doesn't end here. Every few days, the female returns to her own private nursery, ignoring the amorous attentions of the male. She backs down into the water and deposits 2 or 3 infertile eggs. For although there are no predators in the pool, there's little in the way of food either. These eggs, rich in protein, are a vital part of the diet of her tadpoles. They grow quickly on this amazing form of parental care, and it's not long before they leave the plant as tiny froglets. They have well-developed limbs that have evolved to make good the frog's escape. One of the finest jumpers in the frog world is the North American bullfrog. Every year, in May, people gather in Northern California for the World Frog Jumping Championships. The total distance covered by 3 leaps is measured, and the winner gets a trophy.
He's got the knees to prove it. Up Chuck. He had a jump of 16.9 and just saw the heck of it, started hopping back.
Some frogs fail to get the message and don't get into the swing of the event.
Nice high jump on that one.
Others know just what's expected of them.
17.4 and 3/8 on that one.
But those long hind legs are not used just for escape. They're also useful when it comes to catching food. With one leap and a flick of the tongue, the insect is swallowed. Mistakes do, however, occur. Some beetles taste as bad as some frogs. Toads tend to run rather than leap. They have shorter legs. The sticky tongue shoots out from the floor of the mouth and carries the insect back into the throat. In order to swallow, the huge eyes bulge down into the toad's mouth when it blinks, forcing the food down into its stomach. The size of the amphibian dictates the size of its prey. Bunty's toad is tiny, about the size of a garden pea. Its diet is restricted to tiny insects such as termites that it picks off in large numbers. It's found in and around the forests of the Gedi caves near the coast of Kenya. The caves are considered sacred by the local people, who come here to leave offerings to their ancestors. Once their contents have rotted away, the empty half-coconut shells fill with rainwater, a resource that the toads cannot ignore. Bunty's toad has a claim to fame that it shares with very few other frogs and toads: internal fertilization. The male has a tiny penis-like organ. It uses it to fertilize the 2 or 3 dozen eggs inside the female. The frogs use the coconut shells as their own private nurseries. It's clear that internal fertilization has taken place when the female continues to lay fertile eggs in the absence of her mate. The tadpoles develop rapidly, and within a week or so are free swimming, but still living off their yolk supply. A curious disc-shaped structure develops on top of the head. This allows them to adhere to the surface of the water. Perhaps it's an aid in feeding or absorbing oxygen. They'll leave the shell as tiny toadlets within 3 weeks of being laid. While moisture may not be a problem for many tropical frogs, pools of standing water for breeding frequently are. But the rainforests along the Atlantic coast of southeastern Brazil are dissected by small streams that tumble their way down to the sea. This is the home of a curious frog called Hylodes. Each male stands guard over its own stretch of riverbank. Most frogs call to advertise their ownership of the territory. Hylodes is no exception, but it is very noisy near a fast-flowing stream, so it backs up its call with semaphore. It has evolved white hands and feet that really stand out in the forest gloom. It slowly waves its feet at rival males up and down the river, and to any females nearby. They clearly get the message, even though they may be out of earshot of the calls. Should a male accidentally or deliberately wander into another territory, he's quickly seen off. The resident wants no competition for females in his area. Few frogs have adapted to life in fast-flowing streams and rivers. Their soft, delicate bodies could be easily damaged if pounded against the rocks. But one curious frog lives among the cascades and torrents of the northwest Pacific coast of the United States. The tailed frog looks as though it hasn't quite grown out of its tadpole stage. Only the males have this strange appendage. If he tried to fertilize the eggs as they left the female's body by spraying sperm over them, as other frogs do, his milt would get washed away in the stream. The false tail directs the sperm over the eggs as they're laid, ensuring that they're fertilized. The tadpoles hatch into a world of gushing water, but they are well adapted. Their mouths are in the center of a large sucker that keeps them anchored to the rock as they rasp away at the algae on it. Their streamlined shape allows the water to flow freely over them as they feed. The fast-flowing streams of the Cameroons in West Africa are home to another curious frog, whose name aptly, if inaccurately, describes its appearance. Only the male hairy frog possesses hair. It's not hair at all, but long outgrowths of skin. All frogs can supplement breathing by absorbing oxygen from water through their skin. By increasing its skin area with these hair-like projections, this frog can remain submerged for much longer periods, a possible advantage when it comes to mating in the streams. But some frogs have learnt to cope with life in and around fast-flowing water in an entirely different way. The stream banks of Central and South America are home to one of the world's largest tree frogs. During the breeding season, the forests echo to the deep calls of the blacksmith tree frog. The males usually call 10 meters or so up in the vegetation that surrounds the river. Their aim is to attract a female. She prefers the male with the deepest call, as this is normally an indication of his size. The larger the male, the better for the female. When a female arrives, he heads down to the stream edge, where he's already started to excavate a small pool about the size of a dinner plate. Here he continues his work. This is where his size is all important. The larger his body and legs, the bigger the pool he can make. When he's finished, he calls to his mate again. And she hops down to inspect his handiwork. As she lays her eggs, the male fertilizes them as they enter the water. She'll lay 300 or 400 in their own private nursery, free from the many predators that would eat them if they were laid directly into the river. Once finished, the adult frogs leave their nest and return to the trees. The timing of this behavior is crucial. They build their nest at the start of the rainy season. The eggs continue to develop in safety for several days. But as more rain falls, the level of the river rises to a point where the nest becomes swamped and its contents flushed out into the river. But by now, the nest is full of well-developed tadpoles that have a fighting chance of fleeing at least some of the dangers that lurk in the water. Eventually, they'll head up into the relative safety of the trees as tiny froglets. Tree frogs are not just agile climbers. They have highly adapted toe pads that help them cling on to leaves and branches. The underside of each flattened toe is a mass of tiny mosaic-like structures and mucus-secreting glands that work a little like a suction cup. Pressing the body against the leaf also helps to increase grip. But there are some tree frogs that have become a little too large for arboreal life. This giant from Vietnam is as big as a man's fist. and despite its enormous toe pads is having difficulty supporting its considerable bulk on the plant stems. Some species have developed their feet and toes to extremes. The flying frog doesn't actually fly, but parachutes from the treetops to escape danger. The enlarged webbing on its front and hind feet slow down its descent, and its toe pads enable it to maintain a grip when it lands. Up in the trees, life can be lived at a much more leisurely pace, as there are fewer predators. The Brazilian giant monkey frog makes its way slowly up into the canopy like the amphibian equivalent of a chameleon. It rarely ventures to the ground. In fact, many species of tree frog, like this brightly coloured Ecuadorian species, never leave the trees once adult. They call, find a mate, and even lay their eggs amid the branches. They scatter their sticky eggs along moss-covered branches safe from predators and directly above a swamp. As the tadpoles hatch, they drop into the water below, where they complete their development. The jelly coating that protects them from dehydration also keeps off scavengers such as the ants. Ecuador is home to some spectacular amphibians, like this rare leaf frog whose colour and shape give excellent camouflage. It too lays its eggs well clear of the ground. The tadpole's feathery gills are clearly visible. The leaf frog lays a few large eggs so that when they emerge, the tadpoles are more mature and capable of moving quickly to escape predators. Nearby, another species of monkey frog is calling for a female. He augments his croaks with an occasional flash of his yellow flanks. The forest resounds every night to dozens of frog species calling for a mate. The monkey frog's efforts have proved fruitful, and he and his mate are busy preparing a nest of leaves for the eggs. As the eggs are laid, leaves are wrapped around them and stick to their jelly coating. Once the nest is completed, the male and female separate. Their clutch is safe from most predators. Most, but not all. The blunt-nosed tree tree snake is a specialist frog egg eater and can track down a nest using its sensitive tongue. But that sticky jelly that holds the nest together makes it difficult for the snake to eat them. It manages to break off a couple of mouthfuls and leaves the rest of the nest untouched. Ten days later, the eggs are ready to hatch. As they do so, the nest starts to collapse. The tadpoles slither and wriggle their way to the bottom of the nest and then drop to the water below. While some frogs have taken to the trees in this part of the world, others have taken to the caves and protect their eggs in an entirely different way. The first evidence of frogs here are their curious pale tadpoles that inhabit the cave's pools. The frogs themselves are well camouflaged and often only noticed as they whip up their large frothy foam nests. The froth is a mixture of mucus and internal secretions that both male and female kick up with their hind legs. The creamy eggs appear singly and are deposited in the foam. The tadpoles develop inside the foam before eventually breaking out and swimming away into the pool. The two large spots that are normally covered by the frog's thighs are designed to frighten off predators. But foam nesting isn't unique in the frog world. The wetter areas of tropical Africa are home to a huge variety of frogs and toads. One species has combined the safety of an arboreal nest with the moist protection of foam. This is the foam nest tree frog. A lone female puts the finishing touches to her nest. But just as one predator-proof tactic evolves, a predator finds a way to beat it. But remarkably, in this case, it's another frog. Remarkable because frogs normally find their prey by movement. But here, the spiny reed frogs have somehow learnt to find and raid the foam nest in the few critical minutes before it hardens. The reed frogs dive in and swallow mouthfuls of eggs and foam. This behaviour has rarely been seen and never before filmed. Days later, when the nest softens and the tadpoles begin to hatch, the reed frogs return to feast on the wriggling larvae. Reed frogs are strictly nocturnal, so any nests that are built or hatched during the day escape their attention. Up to 200 tadpoles emerge from an undisturbed nest. The surviving larvae drop to the water, where new dangers await them amid the water weeds and lily pads. The foam nest tree frog possesses another remarkable feature that aids its survival. Instead of taking shelter to avoid the heat of the sun, this frog can actually sit fully exposed in it all day long. It changes colour to almost white to reflect heat and has an almost impermeable skin that cuts down dehydration. Other frogs cope with dehydration in a variety of ways. Perhaps the strangest is the Chaco monkey frog. This frog inhabits the hot Chaco regions of Paraguay and Argentina and avoids dehydration by producing a type of wax from special glands on its back. But it has to make sure that the wax is spread thoroughly all over its body into every nook and cranny. Once it's happy that the job is properly done, it can settle down on the branch in full sunlight, protected by its new waterproof coating. It is their astonishing ability to avoid water loss that has enabled some frogs to conquer the world's hottest deserts. The Arizona desert of the American Southwest is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, and certainly no place for a moisture-loving amphibian. The tarantula with chitinous armour is perfectly at home here, as is the horned toad, not a toad at all, but a lizard with all the protection its scales provide. The tarantula spends much of the day in its deep, cool burrow, a home that it shares with an unlikely partner, a narrow-mouthed toad. The toad pays for its lodgings by picking off any ants or tiny parasitic wasps that may pose a threat to the tarantula's eggs or hatchlings. The toad's close relative, the African pig-nosed frog, makes its own burrows and spends almost its entire life underground. Its sharply pointed head forms an ideal shovel. These frogs even mate underground, in a chamber the size of a golf ball. Here, at the onset of rains, the female lays and cares for her clutch of several hundred eggs. They hatch in just over a week, and at first wriggle around in the moist soil. As they become more mobile, they begin to wriggle up onto the back of the female. As water levels in the nearby pool rise, she digs a tunnel for her offspring. They wriggle down to complete their development in open water. The female remains underground. Desert-dwelling amphibians have to dig down much deeper if they're to avoid dehydration. The spadefoot toad spends at least 9 months of the year entombed almost a metre below the parched surface. Only the onset of heavy rain will awaken it. They emerge into the desert under the protection of darkness. It's now a race against time. They must find a mate and spawn immediately if their tadpoles are going to stand a chance of surviving in the temporary desert pools. It's now that they're at their most vulnerable. The hog-nosed snake feeds on lizards and desert rodents for most of the year, but during the rains, its favourite prey is spadefoot toads. Its technique is to simply swallow them whole and alive. It may eat half a dozen in one night. But there are many thousands gathering to breed in the pools. A single female may lay over 1,000 eggs in an evening, scattered over the vegetation. The water's warm, over 30 degrees centigrade, and the eggs develop rapidly. By dawn, they have already broken free of their jelly capsules. The adults must burrow down before sunrise, but they'll emerge on subsequent evenings to feed and build up their reserves again. The desert pools are soon swarming with tadpoles. Spadefoot tadpoles develop faster than any other. They can go from egg to toadlet in 2 weeks, while most species take 2 to 3 months. The deeper the pool, the less likely it is to dry up, but there's a greater chance of aquatic predators such as beetle larvae. Shallow pools quickly evaporate in the sun, but rarely harbour aquatic insects. Under these crowded conditions, the tadpoles adapt a drastic survival strategy. They turn cannibalistic and devour their siblings in an effort to develop more quickly. They're now accessible to terrestrial predators like the tiger beetle. They wade into the shallows and drag the tadpoles out onto the mud. The beetle onslaught makes little difference in the end. All of the tadpoles in this pool will perish as the water evaporates. Those that have survived the predators in the deeper pools are now leaving the water as fully formed little toads. Although all frogs need moisture, there are some that have become completely independent of water. In New Zealand, Archie's frog lays just 1 or 2 eggs under forest debris. Although it's moist, there are no pools here. They hatch into terrestrial tadpoles complete with 4 legs and a large supply of yolk. They wriggle around in the litter and onto their parents' back, where they undergo their entire development. Many other species of frog also carry their tadpoles around on their back. Some have evolved means of protecting their eggs further. The high plateaus of the Ecuadorian Andes are home to the marsupial frog. Only the females live up to their name by possessing a large pouch that extends all the way up her back under the skin. The tadpoles have been growing in here for nearly 3 months, and it's now time to release them. They'll continue their development in the small pools amid the tussocks. A large number of frog species have been declining in recent years, and at least a dozen species have already become extinct. It seems that those frogs living at high altitudes are particularly vulnerable. Pollution or increased ultraviolet radiation because of depleted ozone layers have been put forward as possible causes. But it now looks as though an aquatic citrid fungus is to blame, which itself may have been affected by the increase in ultraviolet light. The problem is a worldwide one, but appears to be reaching crisis level in the Americas and Australia. But there are some frogs that are showing signs of becoming well adapted to the new millennium. White's tree frog is most commonly met with in Australia, outside toilets or dunnies. In fact, it's become known as the dunny frog. It's easy to see what attracts them. It's relatively cool, there's a constant supply of fresh water, and there's plenty of insect food attracted by the lights at night. A number do end up getting thrown out after giving the human occupants a bit of a shock, but they soon make their way back within a day or so. It's this adaptability that has led to the success of frogs worldwide. It could be that we're on the verge of losing some of the Earth's most remarkable creatures, whose very dependence on water may bring them into contact with a deadly aquatic fungus.